Alright, hey peeps. So this is going to be my second build guide video. It's going to be for the multi-shot speed GRs that I made on Diablo Fans. So first off, we're going to go through the set. Your set that you're going to be using is going to be the Unhallowed Essence set. This guide is for, by the way, GR 75 up until, depending on like, you know, what your gear's like, augments, whatever, it can go even as high as almost 90, like, depending on your playstyle, you know, how good you are at it, how active you are, and like what your gear's like, what your gems are, anything. Anyways, so it's gonna be the Unhallowed Essence set, like I said. It's a lot like the T13 build with like a few differences. So run down the gear. You want Hellwalkers, Unholy Plates, Fiendish Grips, Sanctified Shoulders, Accursed Visage, and the Cage of the Hellborn for the Unhallowed Essence set. So for rolls, you're gonna want, and these are decently important, Dex, Vit, All-Res, Multishot. Those are your optimum rolls for Hellwalker. Demon Hunter generally needs a little bit of all-res to help survive in GRs, so that's why you're going to want the all-res. Is it okay if you have armor? Sure, but like as you go higher, you're going to start to run into problems when you're missing all resistance because all those range attacks and stuff are going to start to eat you up. Like sometimes they spit, like the enemies spit fire, poison, whatever, arrows at you, whatnot, and having all resistance just kind of covers all your bases for all these things. Multi-shot, you want the multi-shot skill damage just because you are using multi-shot as your base damage option. So multi-shot where you can get it, always important. It's additive damage, adds to the skill, and then multiplies over your multipliers. Moving on to the Unholy Plates, your legs. You generally want 2 sockets all the time. You put all-res gems in there for the reasons I mentioned before. All-res is just good for demon hunters, so all-res gems are what you want for survivability. Damage shouldn't really be as much of a problem. You can use green gems, but I wouldn't recommend it. Some people do use it. If you're really, really good at dodging, you're just like Superman as far as dodging goes, sure, go for it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Dex, Vit, again, all res. I have armor on these just because they didn't roll all res. That's okay, but generally, if they roll that way, you're going to want to roll like either Fizz or Fire or whatever you feel like you need as a secondary. I'd recommend Fizz or Fire probably. So I rolled Fizz on these ones. It's just how they rolled, but I'd prefer all res. Fiendish Grips. So because this is GRs now, generally your rolls, you want a certain type of roll. They're always going to roll with Dex. You're going to want crit hit damage, crit hit chance for sure, as close to 50 and 10 as you can get. And then your third option, you want either area damage, cooldown, or attack speed. As you go higher, area damage is going to be more of a priority because you're going to be wanting to group mobs up and then try and shoot them down with multi-shot. And then area damage becomes really, really important in its play. There is Imgers of like breakpoint charts and stuff that you can look at for multi-shot and then evaluate whether attack speed is worthwhile or not if you're going to be hitting those breakpoints. But generally, probably area damage would be your best option as you're going higher. I've got attack speed, it's just the way they rolled, so I went with attack speed, but probably, you know, area damage or cooldown if you're going to be gapping Vengeance, but attack speed is okay too. But generally, when you're doing higher GRs, you're going to want area damage. And Sanctified Shoulders. They always roll with all res and dex, and then this just happened to roll. I can't even remember what the thing was, but I rolled it for cooldown because I don't want a vengeance gap. Vengeance is a little bit different in this build. It's not just for It's not just for Seethe, for keeping hatred and everything up, it's also to activate your Visage of Goons, and it says Visage of Goons Vengeance gains the effect of the Darkheart rune. So Darkheart for Seethe actually gives us, I think it's 50% damage reduction, so it's actually very important because when we drop this, you see I've got a small gap, it actually lose our toughness. So like you see right now, it's adding to our toughness, and then when it ticks over, you'll see we lose toughness because we're gaining the Darkheart rune from Vengeance, not just Seethe. So it's about to tick down here, and I'll show you. Boom, like we lose like over half our toughness, you know. So it's really important. You don't want to be gapping Vengeance if possible. So we took cooldown here. Ideal rolls would be Dex. Probably not Vit. You'd go with area damage, all res, and then cool down. Just because the area damage does become more important when you're doing the GRs. We use Cage of the Hellborn, and you need Discipline on it as a secondary. This is your first priority. Mine rolled 12, as you can see, but if it didn't roll it, you have to put it on there. Generally, the way you want the chest to roll would be probably Dex, Vit, and either all res or 15% life, and then you could roll the secondary probably. If it's Dex, Vit, all res, you could roll the secondary to like range reduction would be really good. Melee generally you don't really want just because you're not really going to be in melee range or shouldn't be, and you should be able to dodge melee attacks. But generally you'd probably want ranged ideally. Dex Vit percent life like I have here is fine, and it's usable. Some people prefer it, and then you just go for either Fizz or Fire or whatever secondary you choose. But yeah, because this rolled a certain way, I chose to roll the 15% life because I couldn't use. You can only roll all res when it doesn't roll a secondary resist. This rolled poison, so it is what it is, So I took the life, the extra life. Accursed Visage, you want rolled in a very particular way. You do want Dex, crit hit chance, and multi-shot damage. As you can see, this one rolled Dex 5% crit hit chance, and then I rolled 15 multi-shot. It does have physical resist as a secondary, which we like, that's good. But yeah, you do really want to try for the trifecta, the Dex, the crit hit chance, and the multi-shot. If not, stat priority goes crit hit chance over the multi-shot, and then multi-shot second. So if it rolled, let's say Dex, Vit, and rollable, you do the crit hit chance. And if you really, really wanted, you could go for multi, but I would recommend the crit hit chance over the multi-shot. We've got Witching Hour here. Mine's really good. It rolled Primal, so I've got Dex, Vit, 7 attack speed, and crit hit damage. You do kind of want to get as close to 7 and 50 as you can get, just because crit hit damage is really important for this build. It is weighted really high just because we're overloaded on crit hit chance because we're using an offhand. If you use 2 weapons, like say 2 one-handers, you'd have a green gem in both, and then you'd be overstated on crit hit damage, and then crit hit chance would be worth more. But because we're using an offhand in this build, crit hit chance is weighted less, so crit hit damage becomes weighted more, so crit hit damage is really good. So yeah, as close to 50 as you can get, and obviously the 7 attack speed, just for breakpoint's sake. I don't know the exact ones off the top of my head. I'd have to call up an Imgur file on the net, but you can do that yourself pretty easily. You just Google multi-shot attack speed breakpoints for whatever given rune, like multi-shot arsenal for this one that I'm using. And then they'd show you the attacks per second that you'd have to meet the requirements, and you'd compare it to your attacks per second here. Mine's 2.02. So if your breakpoint said, 2.01, then you'd be meeting it because you're at 2.02. But that's like more advanced stuff. Anyways, we use focus and restraint for this build. For speed GRs, it's not as important for area damage, but obviously you'd like them to roll ancient, so you can put augments on them like I have on mine. Average damage is also really good, so I've got crit hit chance, crit hit damage, average damage. You always want your crit hit chance, you always want your crit hit damage. Crit hit damage is probably more important because, again, offhand build. crit hit chance or crit hit damage is weighted more. So really like seeing that crit hit damage. This is 42.6 and then average damage, really good. And you want the socket obviously, so you can put your gems in there. Same as the other one. Would probably like a little bit more area damage, but it is what it is. I think for this one, I'm just rocking 50, which is fine because it's just for speed GRs. But again, if I were going up higher than just speeds, I would definitely want this closer to probably that 100 to even like 120, 130 area damage range. But because it's just for speeds, it's like whatever. You should just be killing stuff fairly fast. So average damage is really good. It can be weighted really high, and maybe even better than area damage, just because we're going to be doing a lot more single target damage, killing stuff faster. But generally, as you go higher, area damage is weighted really, really high. So yeah, that's the way you want those. You do probably want Wraps of Clarity, even though it would be really nice to wear Nemesis Bracers. You could try and use Nemesis Bracers if you're doing a bit lower, but as you go higher, you do kind of want the Wraps of Clarity just for survivability. But if you do think you can get through it fast, or you're just really good at stutter stepping and dodging, you could go with Nemesis Bracers, try and speed it up. I wouldn't really recommend it for the average person, but yeah, anyways, Wraps of Clarity. You want fire damage, Dex Vit for sure, and crit hit chance. This is pretty much the only way you want it to roll. You could have Dex life per hit as you go higher for multi-shot, because life per hit becomes really, really, really good for survivability. And fire damage, but you'd probably be using the physical at that point because broadside does more for area damage. Just as an example, where is it? Full broadside 500% versus the 360 fire or whatever. We use broadside just because it multiplies better over the area damage as you go higher for high GRs, like pushing GRs. But I'm just using fire in this build because I like fire, because single target damage is good. So yeah, fire, dex of it, crit hit chance, and then as close to 50% secondary as you can get. Ideal secondary roll would probably be, again, range reduction, but we've got lightning, and that's fine. Ideal amulet would probably be a Hellfire amulet, but here we've got the Traveler's Pledge just because it rolled the way we wanted it to. Trifecta, fire, crit, crit. You know, you got your crit hit damage, 88, and my crit hit chance. I rolled on it 10. You obviously need the socket for your gem, and then yeah, it's actually got blind and fizz, which is both really good because blind helps keep the enemies off you, and physical resistance just for like ranged arrows and stuff that might be pegging you. It's okay to have crit hit damage, crit hit chance dex. You know, you're just not going to get quite as much damage out of it. The fire elemental really does help, and you can always check here where it says fire damage increase, and you see mine says 37% because I've got 18 and 19, so that equals 37. And it equates to your fire damage there. It says increases damage dealt by skills using the same element, 6,685,568. So that's how much fire damage I'm going to be doing. And usually, you know, you can compare by looking here or whatever with one that you had that would just be dex or whatever to see how much damage you're doing. But generally, like, just elements better. You know, like you can overstat, but generally when you're only using 2, like the element's just worth a ton, and then plus the convention is a separate multiplier, which it just becomes out of control crazy. So that's the set. You know, the witching hour, the rings, the wraps, any amulet will do. Hellfire preferably, but if you don't want to spend the time for a Hellfire, obviously, you know, like just take whatever you can get kind of thing. I don't really want to farm a Hellfire, it's a pain in the butt. And then for pushing, again, if you don't really want to farm Hellfire, you can use Traveler's Pledge Compass Rose set instead of the Focus Restraint. This is just probably more damage, but you'd need a decent Compass Rose, and you're going to do a little bit less damage just because the Endless Walk, you're generally not going to be at the full buff or whatever, but you know, it is an option if you want more toughness, etc. And then you can wear a more defensive ring like Elusive, but that's a different build. your weapon is going to be Yang's Recurve. This is a must just because it's the multi-shot bow. Your multi-shot stack 50% faster, and its damage increase is between 150 and 200. It is important, when you're doing higher GRs like speeds and higher GRs, you want that probably at least 180 to 190 range. Mine's 198, so it's really good. Unfortunately, mine didn't roll with discipline, so I had to roll 12 discipline on it. This is imperative because you have to have discipline because it directly correlates with your set, as we mentioned before. You get 100% increased damage for every point of discipline. So, 12 discipline on that bow equates to 1200% damage. That's huge. We can't miss it, so that's your biggest damage multiplier. So if you don't have it on there, make sure you roll it. It should be the first thing you check is that secondary multi-shot damage, and then after that checking to see if it has discipline. And if it doesn't, unfortunately, you're handcuffed and you have to roll it. You just got to put the discipline on it. So that's what I had to do here. If it already had it though, I would probably instead roll off the vitality for either area damage or attack speed, personal preference. I think area damage would probably be better unless you're going to be hitting a breakpoint. Putting attack speed on your weapon does exponentially increase your attack speed more than on other pieces, so you could be close to a breakpoint, so you could always check and see if you want that attack speed instead. But that's, again, you'd have to check charts and everything, and that'd be player preference, and you'd have to actually go through the proper channels of finding that online. After that, we've got the quiver. Again, it rolls between, I can't even remember what the range is. I think it's between 150 and 200-ish for the multi-shot again. And then you need discipline on it. This is primal, so it rolled 200 max. It did roll discipline on it, so it's really good. Ideal rolls would be, that always comes with attack speed and crit hit chance, so 20 and 10. And then this one didn't roll cooldown, but if you say it had, then we would have rolled that 15% life for multi-shot damage instead. And then in a perfect world instead, say it rolled cooldown, obviously the attack speed, the crit hit chance, and the multi-shot, we probably would have rolled off the dex for 20% area damage even on top of that. But again, you'd have to weight it, and you would have to weigh it out, and because 1,000 dex is still worth a lot of damage. But that's a little bit more advanced. I mean, you generally would only do that if you're pushing extremely high GRs and you have high Paragon. So then the gems we want are Zeis Stone of Vengeance, just because we're going to be at far range, so we're going to be getting that max damage buff out of it. Bane of the Trap, just because it's going to be your highest damage multiplier out of all the gems other than Zeis. And then your third gem, you have a couple options. I use Bane of the Powerful because when you kill elites, it gives you 15% increased damage versus elites, and it's giving you reduced damage from elites and 20% damage increased against elite packs as well. So it's a lot of damage. You're getting a 20% overall damage boost when you kill elites, and then inherently you're just getting 15% increased damage versus elites and 15% reduction, so it's just pretty good for survivability and damage, just for doing speeds. If you find yourself taking a long time on the Rift Guardian, you can always switch this to Stricken. That'd be your other option. Where I guess if you're really, really struggling, you could also possibly pop in an esoteric alteration, so you take less damage. But I'd probably recommend going with the Bane of the Powerful or the Stricken, depending on how fast you're doing your GRs. You do want them to be, for the best experience, between 2 to 4 minutes max, more 2 to 3 minutes to 2 to 3.5. But again, depends on the rift layout and depends on a lot of things, what boss you get, how much you have to dodge. There's a bunch of factors. We do want diamonds in our gear. You could go with dex ones, but I wouldn't recommend it. All res is really important for Demon Hunter because it's armor class, like I said before. Yeah, all res is just weighted higher, so you're going to be taking a lot of damage. As you can see here, my resistances are even low. Fire, I'm at 71% basically. We're going to take a lot of fire damage just because my fire is really low. My fizz is at least decent. It's at 80.49%, but yeah, like generally you're gonna want all res just so you're taking less damage because you are gonna get hit every now and then. Um, you know, depending on how good you are at stutter stepping, but like yeah, you're gonna get hit and it's gonna hurt. So generally you want all res just to try and mitigate some of that. So that's the setup for gear. We do want cooldown in the helm, the diamond, just so that our vengeance uptime again. Like that's most important because we don't want to drop, we don't want to gap vengeance because we don't want to drop Visage Dragoons. The cube, we do use COE just because when it clicks over to that fire rotation, because we're using Multishot Arsenal, it's going to really burn down enemies quickly, and they're going to have more health because we're doing speed GRs, so convention is pretty important. I would recommend having that in the cube or wearing it if you're not going to use focus and restraint, and you could wear it in compass rose and the travelers, but for this setup we put convention in the cube. And then Visitor Goons and Dawn, just because Dawn reduces the Vengeance cooldown by 65%, which is pretty important. Follower, you're going to want an Oculus as close to 85% as possible, just because the Oculus rings become important in GRs, especially even just speeds, and it helps you nuke down enemies really quick. I use Thunder Fury just to mitigate damage and slow enemies, and then the Don't Die token, which is imperative, doesn't matter anywhere else how it rolls, just the Don't Die token for the Templar, and then I've got Zodiac and then S. Johann for grouping stuff up for area damage and stuff and keeping it off of you. I choose the whole left tree just because it's the best, but it's not huge, but I mean this one gives you hatred per second, which is important, and then the heal's pretty good. I mean you can kind of spec them how you want, but I would generally say keep this one as hatred per second, and the others are kind of personal preference, but you definitely want the hatred per second one. For the actual build itself, we take Thrill of the Hunt just because it slows enemies by 80%. That's going to proc our Bane of the Trapped, so it slows the enemies, procs our Bane of the Trapped, so we do extra damage from that, and we don't have to worry about activating it. Call of the Week just because we get 20% against slowed enemies, synergizes with Thrill of the Hunt and our Bane of the Trapped, so it's straightforward. Awareness, just because it's that extra cheat death, generally you have some pool stack like I do right now, even just so that we get more experience during the GR if you have pools, and then on the close as well it's worth multiplicative experience kind of thing on closes. So generally, like if you don't have a pool but you want to get better experience, you go find one for the close just because it is worth like 20 to 25%. I can't remember the exact for bonus experience on the close. And rifts are backloaded, so you get more experience off of the close than you do anything else. Like killing mobs during the rift is great, and you do get good experience for it. But when you close the rift, like that's worth everything. That's why people you see like higher groups, they try and have pools for the rift and then for the close, because the most important thing is just for the close, and then also for what I was going to say here, for the close, you want to do them as quickly as possible. So they'll generally pick a range where it's 2 to 3 minutes max, like no matter what they're doing. So if you're solo farming, it's like 2 to 3 minutes. If you're doing groups, it's 2 to 3 minutes. If you're doing speed experience, this is your wheelhouse. You want it between 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 4 max, 4.5. Like that's acceptable, but you really do want it between that 2 to 3.5 mark, 2 to 3, if possible. You can, if you really want to be a badass, you could switch it to another damage passive. You could take ambush or steady aim, and probably ambush. But I don't know. I generally would say keep awareness. I use tactical advantage just because when I vault, it gives you 60% move speed for 2 seconds. So because it's speed GRs for this build, generally I just want to go a little bit faster. So I find that getting through the rift faster, I like tactical for it. If we use focus, evasive fire, just because it gets the most hatred, 7 hatred. So it's just about getting our hatred up quickly. Procs focus and restraint, and that's why you use that. Preparation and invigoration helps restore our discipline. instantly restores 30 discipline, so when we're vaulting a little bit through the rift, we do bottom on discipline a bit, so we use this to bang, get it back, and then also permanently increase maximum discipline by 20, so that directly affects our 6-piece set there. 20% or 20 extra discipline equates to 2,000% extra damage, which is a lot. And then we're going to go with Wolf Companion, just because, when you do Wolf, it gives you 15% extra damage when you are wolfing on rotation, and we're just generally going to use it to do more damage during the rift. Really straightforward. I use Tumble just because it costs less, so when we vault and then vault again, it's going to cost less, so we have a little bit more mobility during the rift, and Tumble's probably the best rune for it for this build. Vengeance Seethe, just because we're going to get that extra hatred generation out of Seethe, and it also gives us that 40% damage bump when we have it on, and it synergizes with the Visage of Goons that I've already mentioned in the cube, and that gives us 50% damage reduction, so it's just like a multi-pronged thing, like because it synergizes with the cube and gives us the extra damage, we just don't want to drop this, we always want it up, it's super important. Multishot Arsenal, the fire one, just because, again, like I like fire for single target, and for speeds, I think fire is better. You could use physical, like I said, but that's more of an area damage thing, but I just go with fire for this build. It's just what I like. So that's the build rundown, that's the gear, the way you want it. So obviously I've got augments on and everything, so my sheet is going to be probably a bit higher than some, but yeah, I've got 4.8 sheet, acceptable, decent sheet, that you could be doing this stuff with, you get around that 3 mil, even 2.5, whatever, like you should be able to get there half decently, even 2 is fine. But so for this one, I'll just run through a quick, we'll do like, I don't know, let's do an 83, and I'll empower it just because this is good for getting gems up. You can do around this level, and you don't have to like start at GR 20 or whatever. You can just empower. If you use the speed farming build that I already outlined for Torment and a different guide, using the Boon of the Hoarder and stuff, you should be able to get enough gold so that you can run these gems up before you do rat runs normally, or whatever is what people call them. Anyway, so we're going to do 83 and just show you how it goes. So first thing I do is activate my Vengeance because I want to take less damage, and I'm just going to be moving along and kind of like stutter stepping a bit and like trying to avoid stuff but also killing things at the same time. You want to watch your Vengeance timer as much as you can, but generally you are decently tanky with the RS gems and everything you have in. You do kind of have to be a little bit cautious of things, but you shouldn't take so much damage you're going to get smoked instantly. But I mean, that's what your vault's for avoiding things, and generally you just want to stay at like range so that you can shoot stuff down easy enough. So I try and stick to where there's not enemies. So like see some stuff, I back up a little bit just for zeis range and everything, and then I keep going. You can vault through stuff, shoot backwards, do whatever you want.
My hatred is too low.
So I wolf kind of like on rotation, doesn't really matter. If you want best like wolf uptime, you'd probably for fire, you'd probably activate it halfway through physical, but that's being really nitpicky. I'd just say like use it whenever you want, doesn't really matter. And yeah, I kind of like move around a bit. I'm kind of trying to stay active while I'm doing GRs. And it's good practice for when you're doing higher, because you do have to really stutter step a lot and then avoid everything. So it's kind of good to practice when you're doing these a little bit. But generally, this build just face rolls through stuff. I'm not wearing NIMS, so I just take the pylons as is all the time. Grab the globes. And just keep killing stuff. So I've got power right now. I'm going to do more damage. Oculus, it just melts. Like I jump in the Oculus there. Took a little bit of damage there, so I potion quick. Make sure my Vengeance is still up. Keep going. And as you can see, we're just kind of like, rolling through the rift pretty easy. Nothing's hard. Discipline was low there, so I hit prep. Because I want to top it off, because that directly affects how much damage we do when our discipline gets lower. So you want to make sure you're not going to bottom out on prep. Or bottom out on discipline, rather. Sorry. Preps to get it back. kind of a bad map, so it's a little bit slower. But I mean, sometimes when you get like really open maps, it'll be a lot faster. I'm trying to avoid these things as they shoot at me. Got a conduit pylon, so I'm just gonna take it. Same thing, you just take them as they come. Be a little bit easier because it's gonna do a little bit extra damage as we go. For higher GRs, you're going to want to group up elites and come back to a conduit kind of thing, because it's going to be the thing that does a lot more damage to them when you're fishing, and like you're going to need conduits to nuke down elites, but that's more for a push thing. For this, you just take the pylons as they come kind of deal. Obviously avoiding those explosions because I don't want to get destroyed. Don't want to get hit by those moltens, avoided them all. Just keep going. Another bad map, as you can see I'm bottoming on discipline again, so it's affecting my damage, so I hit prep to get it back again. Pot just because I got hit a little bit hard, go lower, and at the rift guarding it already. And generally, like, you don't do a ton of damage off fire, but here comes fire, and then you'll see just like goes down. So that was a 3.5 minute rift, 11:24. Like a little bit over 3.5, but I mean I was talking, doing other stuff, right? Like you can generally go faster than I just did it there, but generally that's how it goes. And then you just pick whatever, you know, go through the motions, go back, ID stuff, whatever, right? But yeah, overall that's the build. That's how it works. That's for speed GRs. I did an 83 there. I can probably do like 90s at my Paragon and gear up to, you know, below 5 minutes, which is whatever. But generally, like, you're going to be around that 75 to mid 80 mark or whatever, depending on Paragon gear, augments or whatever. And then, like I was mentioning before, you hand it in, get that extra experience because you got those pools saved, so it's a little bit better. And yeah, that's how it works. If you got any questions or comments, you know, leave them for me. Happy to answer. And then, you know, if not, you can always check me out on Twitch. Hope you enjoyed the build guide. Hope it works well for you. If I missed anything or whatever, let me know. And yeah, have fun, guys. We'll see you soon.